There's a saying, when the devil ignores you, then you know you...
God is real. God loves you.
Have you ever wondered what happens when a red-hot celebrity squares off against an atheist interviewer determined to rattle their faith? Have you ever sat forward in your seat as Hollywood's glitterati, guns blazing, defend beliefs in the face of skepticism on live television? Today, we're counting down the most electrifying moments when fame and faith collided, and the stars came out swinging.
Sure. I admire you so much for being open about your faith.
Oh, thank you.
Do you feel like, I feel like you sometimes get shit for that. Do you feel like that's a hard thing?
Oh, yeah, I sure do, but that's nothing new. That's nothing new, you know? If I was of this world...
First, we have Marvel's leading man who refused to be canceled. Chris Pratt faced down an interviewer who sneered at his Christian beliefs, mocking his outdated values. As the tone turned icy, Pratt leaned forward, voice calm but steel-edged, reminding viewers that true faith isn't a trend to be followed or abandoned at whim.
My heart softened and my faith hardened, and that was the moment that I was like, moving forward, I'm going to give my platform to God.
He spoke of grace, resilience, and the freedom he found in embracing ancient truths, even if it meant risking roles in the next big franchise. The audience watched as social media storm warnings flashed on their phones, but Pratt stood unmoved. He turned the tables by noting that atheist certainty can feel as dogmatic as any creed, and that questioning carries more integrity than scoffing.
Stick your head down, you keep driving forward, you have thick skin, and if anyone gets in your way, you stick the horn right up their ass.
Is that fun, sticking it up someone's ass?
Well, that's just, Well,
I didn't mean it like that,
when it comes to...
The host tried to cut him off, but Pratt's rhythm only grew stronger. Each sentence landed with the force of a gospel track, and by the end, the studio fell silent. Pratt had reclaimed the narrative. You thought that was fierce? Well, we have this Oscar winner who wouldn't sacrifice scripture.
I wasn't put on this earth to act. I was put on this earth to share and to be an example of the power and wisdom.
Denzel Washington, Hollywood's revered veteran, sat down with a broadcaster notorious for public skepticism. The interviewer probed, "Do you ever worry your faith makes you less relatable?" Washington's reply came in measured waves. "Real relatability," he said, "springs from authenticity, not conformity."
Watch me, but listen to God. Don't listen to me. I hope that the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart are pleasing in God's sight, but I'm human. I'm just like you. You know, what I have will not keep me on this earth.
He spoke of passages that had guided his career choices, recalling roles he'd turned down because they clashed with his convictions. The host smirked, suggesting that faith-based casting limits box office appeal. Washington shot back with anecdotes of prayer breakfasts and community outreach, proof that faith can open doors Hollywood didn't even know existed.
I was filled with the Holy Ghost, and it scared me. I was like, well, wait a minute, I didn't want to go this deep. You know, I want to party, you know. So, in fact, in 1981 or 82, Robert Townsend took me.
Yeah.
He laughed softly, then delivered the knockout. "If my faith cost me fans, then I'm honored to be fired for standing up for something bigger than fame." Cameras lingered on his calm expression as applause broke out off mic. Hold on, it gets more interesting as the comic book icon who laughed at the cross.
You are, am I wrong here? You are religious in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to bring this up in this day and age when people go, "No, I'm not religious, I'm only spiritual."
Matthew McConaughey stunned a primetime audience when a snide questioner mused that faith makes actors soft. With that trademark Texan drawl, McConaughey recounted how the first shot of Rocky rolls over a stained glass image of Christ, and how that set the tone for his own comeback story. He winked and said, "If leaning into faith makes me soft, then I'll be the softest man in Hollywood." Laughter rippled through the studio as he riffed on humility, redemption, and learning to laugh at your own suffering.
You know what the Latin root of religion is? Re-legare. And legare means to bind together. Re means again. Well, in a world that's saying I'm only spiritual because I want unity, that's exactly what religion means.
He capped his point by quoting from his journals, insisting that vulnerability, not toughness, makes a hero. The anchor tried to shift gears, but McConaughey kept the momentum, spinning doubts into delight. Next, hold on, it only gets wilder. Next, the action queen who saved galaxies on camera squared off against a host, sneering at her belief.
I know who I am. I love who I am. I like what I do, and I like how I do it, and I like my mistakes, and I like the way I learn, and I like the pace with which I learn my mistakes. I don't want to be anybody else but me. And by knowing this,
Zoe Saldana stared down a question about whether faith made her less of a badass. She laughed, a slow, confident laugh that echoed through the studio. "I've flown starships, fought monsters, and survived alien invasions," she replied. "You think a little faith is going to scare me?" Rather than sparking offense, she wove tales of praying for her castmates' safety, of meditating backstage before stunts, and how those spiritual practices kept her grounded when CGI worlds threatened to swallow her whole. As the host tried to pivot, Saldana's grin dared them to match her grace under pressure. The exchange crackled with electricity, proving that you can be both a warrior and a worshiper.
Stanley thought maybe Islam's the answer. Well, I was certainly looking for answers, so I read a lot of books on religion. And then when I was doing Taken 2 in Istanbul, the call to prayer, the Muslim call.
Liam Neeson, the man who once chased villains across rooftops, leaned forward as the anchor sneered. "Isn't faith just a crutch?" Neeson's response was swift, like a well-aimed jab. "If faith is a crutch, why don't you see atheists limping through life?" He spoke of hardened Irish mornings when nothing made sense but a whispered prayer in the dark, moments that saved him from despair after great loss.
Stanley thought maybe Islam's the answer. Well, I was certainly looking for answers, so I read a lot of books on religion. And then when I was doing Taken 2 in Istanbul, the call to prayer, the Muslim call.
His voice softened as he described how faith taught him forgiveness, not once but daily, as he carried the weight of both hero roles and personal tragedy. The interviewer's posture shifted, the smirk faded, and for a heartbeat the studio was silent, awash in the actor's raw humanity.
What code, what book do you think is best for humanity to live by? I say the Bible. What would you say? No, it's an important philosophical question, right?
I have a book called Not the Bible. I'm not kidding. There's literally...
So not loving your neighbor and not helping them.
No.
Next we have Charlie Kirk versus Bill Maher. Charlie Kirk walked into Club Random on April 20th, 2025, facing comedian host Bill Maher, a vocal critic of religion. Maher tried to steer the conversation toward religion being destructive, but Kirk repeatedly shifted the focus to principles like freedom, personal responsibility, and cultural values. He consistently reframed Maher's jabs by spotlighting the real-world implications of secularism and why faith contributes to social cohesion.
No. There's a lot of good stuff.
Charlie.
The story of the Bible is one of love and redemption. There's a lot in the Bible.
Okay.
It is. It's a story of love.
The Old Testament?
The entire arc of the Bible is a story of love and a need for humans' redemption.
Well, that's a charitable way of looking at it, and that's in...
Each time Maher returned to religion's flaws, Kirk countered with examples, legal and ethical structures rooted in Judeo-Christian tradition. Maher, known for his wit and confrontational tone, found himself stuck on defense as Kirk confidently redirected the framing to a principled argument. By the end of the episode, Kirk had controlled the narrative and turned Maher's criticisms into broader cultural critiques, effectively neutralizing the atheist line of attack. Charlie Kirk took on Bill Maher by confidently reframing criticisms of religion into discussions on freedom, responsibility, and cultural values. He controlled the narrative, shifting Maher's focus away from religion's flaws to broader societal implications.
And gotten to the point where I was broke, I was out of money, I was out of food, I was out of even government assistance for food. And the only thing I hadn't done at that point was the thing that was left to do.
Jonathan Rumi, the actor behind Jesus in The Chosen, appeared on The View to counter a mocking line of questioning from atheist hosts. Rather than meet their tone, Rumi responded with calm conviction, echoing historical context and personal integrity. He wouldn't back down, but didn't stoop to confrontational tactics. Instead, he defended belief in Jesus by recounting real-world impact, how his faith shaped his identity, career, and the global millions inspired by The Chosen.
Which was to get on my knees and surrender my entire life and my career and everything that I had up to that point over to God, because there wasn't anything I realized I could do on my own.
As the panel tried to poke holes with skeptical jabs, Rumi brought the conversation back to deeper questions of purpose, meaning, and legacy. By staying composed and earnest, he flipped the dynamic, leading the interview on his terms and effectively turning atheist skepticism into an unanswered echo. Jonathan Rumi faced skeptical View hosts with calm, personal conviction. He redirected their jabs toward deeper questions of meaning, staying composed and guiding the conversation on his terms.
In your version of what you believe in, you keep saying that God's a he.
Yep.
And so where do you get that from?
Throughout both the Hebrew Old Testament.
Next, we have Wesley Huff versus Billy Carson. Wesley Huff, a Canadian biblical scholar and Apologetics Canada director, was last-minute added to the October 18th, 2024 debate with atheist Billy Carson on the Elevating Beyond podcast. Carson attempted sweeping, fringe claims about lost manuscripts and myths, yet Huff systematically dismantled each one by citing rigorous historical evidence and academic consensus.
And the Greek New Testament, you have the masculine singular pronoun used for God.
And why is God a man? Where's the evidence of this?
Well, God isn't a man. See, within historical Christianity,
viewers described the debate as the most humiliating debate Carson ever faced. Huff presented detailed comparisons of genuine versus forged texts, exposing Carson's reliance on pseudoscience. Carson struggled to respond and ultimately pressured hosts to remove the clips, even issuing a cease and desist.
We don't believe that God has a gender. However, the way that he has decided to reveal himself is through the masculine plural, and then ultimately by becoming a human in the person of Jesus Christ. So we don't believe that God has...
Huff's methodical, evidence-based approach shut down every hyperbolic claim. By the time the debate wrapped, Carson had no rebuttals left. Wesley Huff dismantled Billy Carson's fringe claims on Elevating Beyond with methodical, academic precision. Using historical evidence, he systematically refuted each argument, forcing Carson into silence and prompting a takedown of the clip.
Hi, I'm Kirk Cameron, and my partner Ray Comfort and I come to you tonight not as molecular biologists or as rocket scientists, but simply as an author and an actor, and we want to do two things that fly in the face.
Next, we have Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort versus Rational Response Squad. On ABC's Nightline Face-Off, former teen idol Kirk Cameron teamed up with evangelist Ray Comfort to debate members of the atheist Rational Response Squad. The hosts aimed to prove God via design arguments, but the atheists countered sharply by asking who created God. Instead of faltering, Cameron and Comfort pivoted. They dismissed evolutionary crocoduck analogies and reframed the debate around ultimate consequences, eternal destiny, not just logic.
Of convention. One, we'd like to show you that the existence of God can be proven 100% absolutely without the use of faith. And secondly, as a former atheist myself, an evolutionist,
they maintained control by repeatedly steering it back to morality and accountability. Even as the atheists leaned on scientific critiques, Cameron brought the discussion back to personal value systems. By conclusion, he and Comfort had successfully shifted the focus from abstract theory to existential stakes, leaving the atheists scrambling to match emotional resonance with spiritual gravity. Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort debated the Rational Response Squad on Nightline, May 2007. Inviting scientific proof of God, they defaulted to Bible-based morality and emotional appeals. The atheists exposed the format shift and accused them of failing the terms.
Seeking the truth via new atheism and psychedelic drugs. Now, this is a very typical, new age type person into all these things who begins saying, hey, Dawkins really good. And then again, the same.
Next, we have Alistair McGrath versus Richard Dawkins. Theologian Alistair McGrath, once a geneticist and former atheist, headlined a debate against Richard Dawkins on whether religious belief damages or supports a healthy society. Dawkins launched emphatic attacks on faith's social costs, but McGrath responded with a calm, structured counter-narrative. Evolution and faith can coexist, religious traditions provide ethical grounding, and atheism alone lacks a coherent moral framework.
Process of disappointment, disillusionment, reconsideration, and then discovering that Jesus is rather better than psychedelic drugs. The common theme is Christianity makes an awful lot of sense, and the figure of Christ is so compelling that really we want.
He pointed directly to peer-reviewed research showing correlations between religiosity and pro-social behavior or well-being. Dawkins's aggressive rhetoric was deflected as McGrath kept regaining the floor with empirical studies and philosophical coherence. Observers later noted McGrath's composure and clarity gave him the upper hand, effectively neutralizing Dawkins's moral critiques. Alistair McGrath squared off with Richard Dawkins in a 2007 university debate. McGrath countered Dawkins's rhetoric with empirical studies and philosophical rigor, undermining the moral critique of faith.
But science is constantly proved all the time. You see, if we take something like any fiction, in any holy book, in any other fiction, and destroyed it, okay, in 1,000 years' time, that wouldn't come back just as it was. Whereas if we took every science book, right, and...
Next, we have Stephen Colbert versus Ricky Gervais. On The Late Show, Catholic host Stephen Colbert faced atheist comedian Ricky Gervais. Colbert tried framing God as a source of gratitude, but Gervais turned the tables by pointing out that belief in science operates similarly, yet is open to testing and correction.
every fact and destroyed them all. In 1,000 years, they'd all be back, because all the same tests would be the same result.
That's good. That's really good.
So
That's really good.
I don't need faith in science. I don't need faith to know.
Colbert's attempt to equate religious faith with faith in science collapsed when Gervais delivered a knockout. Science is self-correcting and repeatable, religious texts aren't. Colbert was forced to concede the point. The conversation ended with Gervais holding the moral high ground, leaving the host without the authority to shift the dialogue back.
I think Billy has a lot of claims about the Bible, and I hope that our conversation kind of made him think twice about a lot of the claims he's made about the Bible, especially the ones that are patently false and can be verified, even with just a quick Google search. But I think there are still things that...
We have Wesley Huff versus Billy Carson. Already covered earlier, but worth emphasizing once more. Wesley Huff took on Billy Carson's fringe claims with measured precision. Carson was forced into silence as Huff demolished each claim with historical evidence.
Billy has said about the history of Christianity, about biblical languages that do need to be corrected, not because I have some sort of vendetta against Billy, but because I want people to know what is true. And as
Clips went viral, viewers called it humiliating, and Carson even issued a cease and desist to suppress them, an unmistakable sign of defeat. These exchanges showcase how framing, composure, evidence, and moral clarity can decisively neutralize atheist critique. If you felt the heat of these on-air showdowns, don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now, hit like, and drop a comment below to tell us which celebrity crushed their skeptic interviewer most spectacularly. Your voice matters. Join the conversation.